Hey everyone, I'm Mary from therosehomestead.com, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I make sourdough pasta. Okay, this pasta is going to be quite a bit different from the pasta that I shared a few months ago. I'll link that up above. I'm actually going to be making this one in the food processor. It's a little bit easier to incorporate the sourdough starter into the flour. I'm also not using eggs today. It's just flour, a sourdough starter, and a tiny bit of water. My sourdough starter was fed about 4 or 5 days ago, and it's been in the refrigerator, but it'll work. As long as it's been fed like within a week and you've kept it in the fridge, it'll be fine. I'm going to be using kamut flour, which I think makes the best pasta. Now, if you're really sensitive to gluten, I'm going to let this ferment for at least 6 hours. But because I'm using kamut flour, which is easier to digest, I think it'll be just fine. If you want a longer fermented, I would highly recommend starting this, say, around 7 in the evening. Let it sit out until you go to bed, and then put it in the fridge for an extended cold fermentation, and it will work just fine. The main thing is you don't want to over ferment this, because pasta needs to be really stiff to be able to roll it out and cut it. So, alright, well, we're going to go over to the food processor and put this together, and I'll show you what you're looking for consistency, and then we're just going to let it sit all day and come back to it a little bit later on. Okay, so I'm just going to use my regular blade for this, and I'm going to put 1 cup of flour. This is, like I said, this is kamut. Now, a little trick with the making pasta in a food processor is to pulse it a couple of times, just to kind of make it a little more airy. So now we're going to put our sourdough starter in there. This was fed like 4 days ago, and it still looks so bubbly. Just get it kind of evenly around the bowl here. Now you want to have a little bit of water standing by, just to make sure everything comes together properly. I'm going to take this out because this is where, you can't see that, sorry. I'm going to take this out because it's where I pour my water. And I'm just going to pulse this a few times to start bringing the flour and sourdough starter together. Now, before you add any water, you want to check it, because you don't want to add water if you don't need to. And it really depends on the hydration of your sourdough starter. So this doesn't stay together, so you want to squeeze it, and if it falls apart, then you need a little bit of water. I'm not going to need much, so I'm just going to drizzle a little while I'm pulsing it. Then you want to check it again. I put about 2 tablespoons of water. I wouldn't do more than that at a time, because you'd be surprised how fast this comes together. You don't want it to come into like a ball of dough, because then you went too far. Oops. That's feeling pretty close. So if you can see that, it came together and it stayed together. Hopefully that's not too bright, but yeah. So I think this is going to be good, and it looks like it still just crumbles, but when you squeeze it together, it stays together. So I'm happy with that. We're going to move over to the workstation and knead this for a couple of minutes into a nice ball of dough and then put it in another bowl to ferment for the day. Okay, so here's the pasta. You can get a better look at it here. It looks crumbly, but I can squeeze it together. Kind of like a pie crust in a way. So we're going to take this out of the food processor and just dump it here on the table carefully. I think that the hard part when you're first learning to make pasta is you want to get it too wet. You want it to come into a ball of dough, and you just kind of have to learn the consistency. Now you just want to take your hands and squeeze it together. It'll take a couple of minutes, but it'll come together. This is when you get your workout for the morning. I'm going to have a blog post. I'm going to share it down below with these measurements and how to do this so that you can make it anytime that you want to. It smells sourdough already. Smells absolutely delicious. Your goal is to just get it into like a smooth, cohesive ball of dough. I would say that the 2 tablespoons of water was spot on, but it really, like I said, will depend. If you have a much wetter sourdough starter, you're probably going to use a lot less water, or maybe none at all. If you have a thicker sourdough starter, you may need to use up to 4 tablespoons of water. But so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this in a bowl and I'm going to cover it, and I'm just going to let this sit all day to ferment and get all the good benefits of the sourdough before we roll it out and cut it. Okay, this has been going all day, close to 6 hours, and it's puffy. You can tell that it has fermented well. It smells very sourdough. It's very puffy. You probably can't tell that or see that, but you can tell that it has risen, so to speak. So now what we're going to do is take this, and I'm going to move you over here because we're going to roll it out in a pasta roller and get everything cut. And I'm going to use a pasta drying rack to let it dry for a while before I actually cook the pasta up. So I'm going to move you over here. We're going to probably cut this into 4 equal parts, and that way we can make it just as thin as possible. Alright, so what I did was to cut the ball of dough into like 4 equal parts. You can even see in this one how the sourdough made it more puffy. Now my machine goes from 1 to 7, and the 1 is the furthest apart on these rollers here. And what you do is you just want to put your dough through each number a couple of times. I ran this through once, and just to make sure it wasn't going to stick, but it's doing great. The consistency and texture of this dough is awesome. So we're going to run it through each number twice. And what you're looking for, and I have to make a quick note, this pasta, this dough smells, if you've never tried the sourdough pasta, you are going to be blown away. The smell is amazing. But you go through each number a couple of times, and what you're looking for is a really thin sheet of dough. You can even use the sheets of dough as lasagna if you want to. Alright, so here we go. We're getting thinner now. You can tell it gets a little harder to go through. Just take your time. So, I like a little bit of a thicker pasta, but this is where you make a decision. I'm at a 4, so I went from 1 to 4, and this is, you can kind of see through the dough when you hold it up to the light. And you can see that it's very smooth. So what I'm going to do is put it on my drying rack to just hang out while I do these other ones. So once you have the pasta on the drying rack, you want to let it dry for like at least 30 minutes. You can cook it right away, but it's more apt to stick together. So the longer you can let it dry, the better. Less sticking when you put it in the pot. So I'm going to let this dry until I'm ready to start dinner. It's probably going to be about an hour, which will be perfect. And then we'll come back to it and I'll show you how to cook it off perfectly. Alright, so our pasta's been drying for about an hour and it's already stiff. It feels completely different than it did when I put it up to dry. The water's boiling. You want it heavily salted because that's what's going to give it flavor. And we're going to boil this for 3 to 5 minutes, but it really is dependent upon how you like your pasta. So I always say just after 3 minutes, taste it, try it out, and then a couple more minutes and just get it to what you want. So I'm going to put these noodles in to the boiling water. They've started drying out nicely. So that is homemade sourdough pasta. I hope that you will give this a try. I'm always looking for new ways to use my sourdough starter and to be more proactive in using my starter for health reasons as well. So if you are sensitive to gluten but you want to make pasta, this is the recipe for you. It is so simple. As I said before, if you'll head over to therosehomestead.com, you can search sourdough pasta, and I have a printable recipe that you can print off and use just whenever you want to make pasta. My plan is probably, I'm going to start making a couple of batches a week and dry them completely and start storing them because I'm bad to want something that's a little more convenient. So that'll be perfect. I'm also going to link the pasta roller and the pasta drying rack if you choose to use those to make it a little bit easier to make your pasta. You don't have to have them at all, but it does make it just a little bit easier. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy videos on cooking from scratch, gardening, food preservation, and homesteading, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below. I make 2 new videos every single week, and we would just love to have you here. So we will see you on the next video.